Hello, everyone. It's 11 o'clock, and we both have Ian Parkinson, the Executive VP, and David Gower on the call. My name is Doc Jones, the resource investor. Just to clarify for everyone, I don't get paid for any of the coverage I do on any of the companies that I invest in. I'm basically an activist high net worth individual in his retirement from being in the finance industry. Becoming involved in the investments that I take in companies. I run a very focused portfolio because of that. Now, today we're going to be talking with Emerita Resources. We last talked with them right after they released the 43101, the initial resource on the IBW project, which came in about 18 million tons at more than double the cutoff grade. And they've been expanding it since. Now, Emerita Resources is a polymetallic developer explorer in the Iberian Pyrite Belt of Spain. They're actually the third largest mineral holder in the belt, having wrapped up many strategic land packages through the public tender process. And without further ado, I would like to introduce David Gower and Ian Parkinson. Hi, guys.
Good morning.
Hi, Doc.
Good morning, Doc.
Nice to speak with you.
Yeah, nice to speak with you as well. So the reason why I asked if you guys would do a call is there's been a recent development that's very interesting for Emerita Resources, and that is the discovery of a copper-rich zone at Romanera, which is a very large VMS deposit. So I thought initially, if you wouldn't mind, because of your extensive geological background, if you could just give us a little bit of an autonomy of a VMS system so people understand what this all means. I did post a graphic under this spaces so people can see visually what we're talking about.
Yeah, well, VMS systems or volcanogenic massive sulfide systems. They're the classic polymetallic base metal plus or minus pressure precious metal deposit. They occur worldwide over ages from the Archean right through to present day. Basically, they form on the ocean floors at the time, and they form in areas where there's rifting or spreading, essentially. And that spreading may be in a back arc environment, so you've got a collision at some place like you see off Australia right now going on, but behind that you get actually spreading centers, which is a very common area for these types of things. For people who've watched some of the science channels and they've seen these black smokers that occur on the Pacific west of Vancouver Island and along that seaboard, that's essentially these types of deposits. I think there are some more again off Australia between there and PNG. Forming presently. So essentially what you have is this rift environment which allows very hot fluids from magmas at depth to be driven to the seafloor surface. So that these fluids are carrying heavy metals. They're brines essentially with a lot of CO2 and other volatiles, obviously, entrained in solution. And they're typically, well, I think at the smokers, they measure them around 400 plus degrees C. And when they hit that cold, plus the combination of the temperature and the lack of confining pressure essentially allows those fluids to boil and the metals come out. That's essentially the process. What happens then is you do typically get a zonation in these deposits, and we're seeing that here. Copper comes out of solution at a much higher temperature or somewhat higher temperature and earlier, and typically closer to the vent than zinc, lead, and the precious metals. The result is that you typically, and the metallurgical deposits in Quebec are classics for this because they're not deformed.
Uh,
You get a central copper stringer zone, so that the copper actually starts to come out within the vent and immediately adjacent to it, and then the lead zinc with lesser copper typically comes out up top at the seafloor interface more, and of course forms kind of a mushroom cap around the vent. And it's never quite that simple, of course. In real life, the vents can be quite linear. These systems are dynamic. They get modified by faulting, etc. Um, and there's a bit of a continuum as well. So the ones that you see in the on the learning channel, typically these ones are higher grade and smaller, and
mhm,
partly it's because they're very dynamic environments. And often they get destroyed by subsequent volcanic activity. The much larger deposits typically come out. In fact, they wouldn't be as spectacular to see as those. In an environment in these basins, you often get a lot of sedimentary deposition going on. So there's a layer of sediment that's not really consolidated that can be quite thick. And if they're ejecting into that, it's a more quiescent environment, not quite as much relief on the seafloor in those areas, and you get much larger pools, and it tends to be more likely to be preserved, but still the same basic structure. The highly charged liquids get sort of injected into these sediments, which are about 60 to 80% water at that point.
mhm.
As I said, they're unconsolidated. And because of the density difference, the sulfides are much heavier. They settle through them, and you get nice banded sulfides in that case. But that's the basic model, if you will.
Okay.
Reflecting
So,
on what we see at Romanera right now, the last hole that we put out is really the first time that we've seen this really nice thick copper stringer zone, which tells us we're kind of just getting into the core of the system here.
yeah, that was like you had 12 meters at close to 3% copper, and then another almost 9 meters of 2.5% copper. And within that, you had some copper, silver, zinc, and whatnot. And the overall zone was almost 70 meters of mineralization at 1%
Yeah,
copper.
yeah.
So if
And
you're just getting in,
that wasn't a true width, by the way, just to be clear.
yeah,
It's about 60%, just because of the angle we hit it, where we believe.
okay.
With the footwall zone, it could be a slightly different orientation as well. So it may or may not have been close to a true width, in fact. But based on our model for the rest of the deposit, that would be the estimate. But by its nature, a football zone can actually have a different strike into it.
So, are you seeing in the core at this point? Can you tell whether or not there's been any deformation or severe faulting? Like, what is your thesis currently as far as with this copper zone and delineating it, and what is its potential effect upon the resource once it's updated?
Well, it's we have a lot of drilling before we could really answer that in a definitive way to
Okay.
do. But I mean, the deposits in the Iberian Pyrite Belt typically are somewhat deformed, some way more than others. So Infanta, for example, is quite, it's almost within a fault zone, and it's quite attenuated. Whereas Romanera is more removed from that sort of structure, and it's more in one place. A lot of the deposits within this belt have very significant copper zones associated with them, and so fingers crossed. And of course, Neves-Corvo for probably 40 years primarily was a copper mine, and now they're developing the zinc zones, which they've known about for a long time.
Yeah.
Aljustrel, which is also in Portugal, north of Neves-Corvo. It's smaller, but they have zinc zones and copper zones there. Of course, First Quantum's operation near Seville at Cobre Las Cruces has been a large copper open pit, but there's a base metal deposit, sulfide deposit, primarily lead zinc with lesser copper. That's very significant underneath it. And in that case, it's probably an overturned system structurally, but intact just the same. So yeah, we view it as very encouraging, but until we complete the drilling, you really don't know what you have.
In the belt there, what is the average strike to depth, and where are we in that calculation?
What we kind of see if we do a model is the vertical extent of deposits commonly is at least two, probably more often as much as three times the lateral extent. We have about a 600-meter strike length of sulfide mineralization at Romanera, and we're down now we're still under 700 meters. So
okay, about one by one.
Yeah. So it's
okay.
and we're still hitting sulfides, and the geophysics, the borehole geophysics suggests the sulfide mineralization at least keeps going. Now, again, you have to drill it to establish grade, but
right.
Whether that relationship will hold up in this case until you drill it, you don't know. But so far, the deposit continues to expand at depth. We've now got sulfide intercepts. I'm still waiting for assays, but we're 180 meters below the deepest hole that was used in the resource estimate that was published in May.
Right.
So we still have to do the lateral drilling around the step downs that we've been doing, and that's something that's going to take place through the rest of the year. Our plan, and we're at least costing out bringing in a directional drill company so that we can basically use the deep holes that we're doing as pilot holes and start to do directional cuts off of those, which hopefully will shorten the lead time we need as we get down on these longer drill holes that we're doing.
Yeah, and that will also bring the cost down, wouldn't it? Because you're basically using the previous borehole. So
yeah, it saves quite a lot of drilling meters as well as time. But obviously, there's a cost for the directional company to come in. But that's the whole idea.
So since we last talked, after the 43-101 was issued, you've done considerable amount of drilling and releasing of assays, and I'm seeing just the last couple of releases. You had the most recent one with the high-grade copper, and prior to that, like 13 meters of almost 4% lead, 13% zinc, 1.3 grams of gold, 120 grams of silver, and 23 meters of 2% lead, 5% zinc, half a gram gold, 79% zinc. Prior to that, 42 meters of 1% lead, 2% zinc, 2.5 grams gold, 70 grams silver, and all these are below the resource shell of the 43-101. So the question I pose to you is, since the 43-101, how are you feeling about the growth of the deposit based on the data that is publicly available out there? You've got a series of drill holes that have hit wide zones of what would be considered a mineable grade. It more than meets the cutoff grade, and the widths are amenable to potentially a long hole stoping and whatnot. So what is your opinion on the drilling that has happened post the cutoff from the 43-101?
Well, I mean, obviously we're excited with what we're seeing. It's the deposit continues to grow, and we always indicated that the initial resource was just that, an initial resource. But we had, we needed to put it out to really advance some of the other activities that we wanted to do. But yeah, I can't put a number on it at this point because we haven't done this step out drilling to the east and west of some of these holes. So we've kind of established that the zone continues, and we expect probably the strike length should be fairly similar to what it was higher up. So, it's the deposit continues just to grow, and in general, the grades that you quoted are higher than the grades, the average grade of the deposit. So it's not just tons, but these will also impact the average grade of the overall deposit.
Okay.
Based on the assumptions that were used, which again, we're assumptions of recoveries. They're not recoveries. I need to stress that to people. The factors that were used were the best estimates that metallurgists related to the QP's company felt comfortable putting in place. But the real resource will be restated once we have the metallurgy completed, and that's obviously in progress now.
Okay, and that metallurgy is expected sometime in the fourth quarter. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's right. We've right now have three. They're 100 kilogram samples, representing three different ore types. In the lab, and of course, the key one is the high precious metal.
This space was downloaded via spacesdown.com. Visit to download your spaces today.
Deposit or sample, sorry, because that's where we've been very conservative in terms of the recoveries in terms of the resource, and as somebody maybe as you pointed out, there's about 750,000 ounces of gold nominally in that resource, and we're only accounting for 20% of that. So
it's like 100. You're only getting credit for 140,000 ounces. So there's over 500,000 ounces of gold prior to the drilling that you've done since then, where there were some zones with like 8 grams over 10 meters and stuff like that, that you're not getting credit for. So that metallurgy should be quite interesting when it comes out, because
it's an unusual deposit for the belt. I'm not aware of anywhere else where they have such a significant gold zone. And it occurs across various ore types as well. But it does seem to have a nice coherent distribution that we can probably design a mine plan around, so we know, during these years of the mine, this will be the primary ore type that we're dealing with, which sets up well for the mill.
Sure. And will you be doing the same? I'm sorry, would you be doing the same for the copper zone as well? Because, as you know, when you're feeding an ore type that is just basically one type of metal, it's much easier to get, very high recoveries, all else being equal.
We will at the right time. At this point, with one hole, we don't know if it's not a huge component of the ore body, then it's not worth it. It'll just be mined with the rest. But typically, as you point out, something like a copper zone that doesn't have a lot of other sulfide mixed with it is generally much easier metallurgy. So it's and that's certainly what we see in the other deposits in the belt as well. It's not, that won't be a surprise to anybody. And just reflecting back on what we said about originally about the VMS deposits, the precious metals sometimes do cut across ore types because they come out late. As the system is sort of declining, they're kind of a last gasp, and as things are cooling, they kind of get deposited as the thing is sort of receding, and and just find their own homes. But I think, you're asking about the increase. At this time, I maybe ask Ian to make a comment. Ian was an analyst for 15 years or more, and maybe give an analyst sort of take on how you see this thing evolving with the results we're getting.
Yeah, that would be great. Hi, Ian. Welcome.
Thanks, Doc. Appreciate your time and you hosting this. Now, listen, like David said, we first and foremost we have a lot more drilling to do, without question. But the deposit continues to get bigger. We need to fill in some of the drilling. The directional drilling is going to be very important, but there's no reason to think that we're anywhere close to fully defining IBW. So stay tuned. The evolving copper story I find is very interesting, because as I speak to investors and maybe some of your partners on the line agree that the copper is much more of the consensus long when it comes to base metal stories. So very, very happy to see the copper emergence, and the proof of concept that we do have a full VMS deposit here, which should be fully polymetallic, as David outlined. So again, hesitant to give a number or a percentage of increase, but very confident in saying the deposit has definitely grown since the MRE we put out a few months back.
Great. And as far as the Treasury, you recently completed a financing of about 11 million, of which, as I recall, insiders invested a little over $1 million of their own money into the financing, hard dollars, which was great to see. What type of runway do you guys have now as far as how far does that take you? Because I know about 18 months from now, we have a very important date in court. So what is the work program between now and what are the catalysts or the unanswered questions that you guys intend to do, and how you're budgeting that out?
We're in very good shape, I think, financially right now. We've essentially got all of that financing left because we still had money in the Treasury when we went to the market. The burn rate is significantly lower than it was leading up to the MRE. We had up to 16 drills operating, and that's a massive burn. And we ran them longer than initially planned because the results at depth were good, and we wanted to get those into the resource estimate. So now we're down to 6 rigs, and drilling is by far the biggest burn rate in exploration. The metallurgy, it's more or less a fixed cost with a contingency for doing several iterations, perhaps on improving final results. So it's a few $100,000. It's not millions of dollars to do the metallurgy, and similarly, the engineering work that we're doing, the conceptual mine planning, is it's not anywhere near the range of what you burn on drilling. So our burn rate is much more manageable right now. And that gives us obviously a much longer runway. And we're proceeding also with permitting, which we were doing all along as well. So those are the key activities. In terms of catalysts, obviously an important one will be the completion of the metallurgical work. And that will lead to a restating of the resource, because they'll take out those previous guesstimates of recoveries and actually replace them with the actual data. And of course, we'll add in the results of the new drilling as well, so we would expect hopefully to see the actual recoveries, which we're somewhat cautiously optimistic that the gold recoveries should be quite a bit better in the high grade parts of the deposit than what we've given them credit for. And of course, just with the drilling, there'll be additional tons as well. So it'll be a more robust project. In my view, it's already a project that meets the criteria for a significant mine, but it's continuing to improve. If you look at the grades, and I think you can see it in one of our presentations that we put out after the MRE, they're in line with other grades in the belt, such as at Aug.17 or Neves-Corvo. But we're from 0 meters down to right now 650 or something like that, where they're starting, they're mining now below a kilometer and almost 2 kilometers in some cases. So it's a very
your cost per ton.
Good situation to be at surface, believe me, from every aspect. It's time, it's capital, it's it's cost of drilling. All of these things, it means you don't need a shaft for your capital. All of these things are beneficial to the project. And of course, we're in a great area in terms of infrastructure with a great mining culture. So I think, generally we're pretty amped up, even though I tend to talk too calmly sometimes. I'm sure that drives you crazy, but about the prospects for this project.
No, that's okay, Dave. I'm plenty excited for the both of us. So there's some drilling going on also at Alkira, and I know it's the hottest part of the year, so productivity is, in general in Spain is very low. So when does the hot season end, and then there should be a pickup in productivity as well as then news flow and all those things.
So basically, you're not allowed to run in the south of Spain right now. You get temperatures over 40 degrees in the daytime, and during that period, you're not allowed to run any kind of heavy equipment. It doesn't matter if it's mining or construction or anything else. So it does mean productivity is very low right now, which obviously reduces our burn rate even more because we pay for our drilling by the meter. But
right.
The season usually will end mid-September.
Okay.
It's been unusually hot here this year, so
right.
it may run an extra week or two. But basically, as the days get shorter and the nights get longer, you just don't get that build-up of heat that you see. So right now, essentially from midday to 8 o'clock at night, and sometimes more than 12 hours of the day, we can't operate. So, and that's why we're waiting until that ends to bring in the directional drilling as well, because it's there's a lot of standby that you have to pay for while they're waiting on holes and in that type of contract, and it wouldn't make sense to do it now with the productivity that we have. Similarly with the Nuevo Tintillo drilling, it's better to wait. That's an area where we'll probably be hauling water for the drills, and at IBW we're kind of in farmers' fields, whereas at Nuevo Tintillo it's low brush and scrubby brush, and we would just see a much more significant risk for fire over there because of just the nature of the landscape. And really, it just takes somebody parking a pickup truck, in a catalytical converter in some tall grass or something, and these things can take off in that weather. So we just we'll wait until the restrictions are done before we start the drilling over there as well.
So that would be in September around?
Probably late September, I would think.
And what type of program are you planning this year at Nuevo Tintillo?
The initial program, we're only looking at, Ian, jump in if I get this wrong, but I think sort of 2,000 to 2,500 meters to just do some target testing. We have some very compelling targets.
Right.
Obviously, if we hit, then we'll retool the program to reflect the success, and
Well, I think
But
that's the most important. That's probably the most important comment right there, right? If we hit something, then we will be as aggressive as we have in the past. I think that's the key message.
Yeah.
just for people listening who may not be familiar with Nuevo Tintillo, can you do a quick little overview of what that land package is and its geological and geographic location, why it's so important as a prospective land package?
Sure. It's a very large package. It's about 23 kilometers east to west, and it's located in very productive geology between the Rio Tinto deposit, which is to the west, and Asnalcoyer and Cobre Las Cruces, which is to the southeast, mostly east. Within that land package, there are three small past producers that date to the early part of the last century, we believe. Two of which are on our ground, and there's a small postage stamp claim surrounded by our ground where one of these small deposits were exploited. But notwithstanding that, there's another half a dozen other historical showings, and it's never really been properly explored in a modern context. We flew the airborne EM survey over it last year, and the two old deposits on our claims are on the western side of the property. And Doc, as you've been there a couple of times,
Yeah.
you can see, basically, you can look across the valley and you can see Rio Tinto mine. So the targets that we're focused on initially will be in that area where the old Santa Flora and Nazareth mines were. We've done the more detailed gravity work around there. So we do have really nice coincident gravity and EM in areas with historical mineralization, looking across at Rio Tinto, which I think is probably the biggest VMS deposit in history. It's not very high grade, but it's about 500 million tons or something like that.
Yeah.
And we see exactly the same geological environments without the 500 million tons at this point where we are. So
although those historic mines, if memory serves from the historical documents, they were mining at about a 5-6% copper grade. So
Nazareth was, yes, and of
yeah.
course the interesting thing here is you do have a mill within sight of the property, which I think probably would have excess capacity to take in higher grades. So it's quite possible that you could develop something here at very low capital and do some kind of an agreement with the operation, which would fast track things, would simplify permitting because you're not creating another tailings site, etc.
Yeah. Well, there also will be another mill close by too, but
that's right. At Asnalcoyer, there's that's just as close.
Yeah, like that's all trucking distance, which leads me into my final thing that I wanted to update on is the we're now getting closer and closer to the court date for Asnalcoyer. We're about 18 months out now, and as far as I know, there isn't anything that has really changed specifically about the case. There's still 16 people charged. Charges have been upgraded to serious crimes. We still have 3 levels of court that have ruled crimes were committed. We still have 5 Superior Court judges that ruled crimes were committed. We have a judge, a date, all those things. The only thing that I can see that's changed is in the lateral perspective. We have seen cases in Spain that have gone to trial with some of the same type of charges where the individuals have found guilty of embezzlement or prevarication, those sort of charges that we're seeing layered on to the 16 that will be appearing before the judge beginning in March 2015. Any comment on how things are going there, or your own view on what you're seeing in the court system that relates to Asnalcoyer? David or Ian, if you want to chime in on that.
Really, there's nothing new to say. the court date is set for March 3rd of 2025. It's a very senior judge who's got a very impeccable track. Well, actually, it's three judges, but the lead judge of that particular court is very senior, and this court has to be heard only by very senior judges. It's a very high-profile case when senior government officials are being charged with any form of corruption. Obviously, the government in Andalusia has changed, so it's not the current government that kind of has to wear the scandal of this, which I think is also very important for us.
Mm-hmm.
But the courts, in our experience, because we went through a similar thing with IBW, it wasn't a criminal case in that case, but it did go all the way to the Supreme Court, and the courts were independent, and they do their job properly. It's a different legal system than we're used to, but the next phase is essentially appears to be the sentencing phase, and conclusion of conviction should trigger the administrative court, which has already done its work, to basically essentially
Resolve.
at IBW. They tell the Mines Department to retract any previous resolutions relating to the awarding of the tender, and then give them specific instructions on how to proceed. And that's what we would expect to happen here now.
Right, and you are the only.
I am not a lawyer.
Qualified.
We are.
Yeah, I know.
We are the only other qualified bidder, and I make it clear I am not a lawyer, especially not a Spanish lawyer.
Yeah.
But obviously, we spent a lot of time on this and asked a lot of questions, and that's the feedback we get.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I talked to your legal counsel when I was in Spain, and that tracks exactly the same. There's you're the only company that went through phase 1, phase 2 was approved. In all areas, the financial component, which was phase 1, that brought you to phase 2. You're the only one that did a feasibility study level type of work that had the drill hole data. It's and then the last year and a half was pretty exciting for the case, because if memory serves, there was only 7 people charged, and then they upgraded and brought 9 more people up on charges, so to a total of 16, and then they took those charges and upgraded them to more serious crimes. And then the whole chain of events, setting a date, denying any further appeals, the administrative court saying that they're prepared to rule and they're going to use the outcome of the criminal case, as well as the administrative irregularities in resolving of the tender. So there's a lot of momentum that's leading up to this clock that's ticking down, which is now only about 18 months away, as opposed to the 2.5 years when it was first announced. And since then, things are plugging away quite nicely.
Well, I mean,
our
focus right now is to develop IBW as far as we can get it.
Of course,
it's a really good project on its own merit. An important factor with AZN is that the administrative court is, I don't know if this is quite correct how I say it, the translation, but more or less it's a lower court than the criminal court. And generally, and I've been told generally means 99% of the time, where both courts are involved, would never supersede the criminal court. And the reason for that is if it makes a ruling in advance of the criminal court that's contradictory, then it just creates grounds for appeal. So
right.
They will finalize their work once they see the final outcome of the criminal court, even though they it's already been published that the 5 Superior Court judges have declared the crimes were committed. So that's just an important part of the process, I guess.
Right.
and we could just see where that goes. But once, like I said, with IBW, once the final ruling was made, things were done within a period of months in terms of getting
Yeah.
the actual project. But clearly, at that time, I would expect the market will start to react on the news. It's such a big project, and that tender was to put it back into production. It was not an exploration tender. That's why it was so complex.
Right.
We did a full engineering study, about 10,000 pages for our submission, with plant, tailings, water, social, mine plan, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a very exciting project.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is. Every time I go there, I'm in awe of the $30 million wooden broken down fence that's around it.
Well, I think also it's very important, we're speaking to investors here, that there's zero value in the company for that project at this point. And, And I think that's not a bad thing right now. But we also, I'm not that satisfied personally, and maybe Ian, you can jump in here with how we're being valued on IBW, because it's a great project that's improving all the time, and maybe Ian, you can talk a little bit to that from an analyst perspective.
Yeah, no, I guess a couple comments from my side. Just on the Asnukoyar side, just remember for the listeners, we only got the permits to drill IBW 9 or 10 months before we released the EEU. So if you think of Doc's comment that we're 18, 19 months away from a court ruling, think of what type of value we might be able to add to IBW in that period of time, right? We did a lot of work in a short period of time, and I think that's missed by some people. 15, 16 drills turning is a phenomenal, huge drill program by any company standard, right? So we had a small company with a big company drill program. So we have all the potential to continue to add value to IBW while we wait for a positive outcome on Asnukoyar, which is great. But speaking purely on IBW, if you think of a project, and these are not Emerita numbers, but there are published estimates out there that IBW NAV is somewhere, at this stage, somewhere between $700 and $800 million. So again, that's not my numbers, that's not David's numbers, but that is from street consensus. You would expect a company with only IBW in its portfolio to be trading somewhere between 25 and 35% of NAV.
Right.
At this stage, right? We're still in the resource definition stage. We have not got confirmed metallurgy. We haven't got pre-fees or feasibility study, but that's where our comps tend to be trading at. And then you move through the de-risking process and you get permits in place. You get a pre-feasibility in place. You move up to 0.5, 0.6 times NAV to ultimately trading in a good market at 1x NAV. So we are priced completely out of the context of our peer group. And like we highlighted 20 minutes ago earlier in the conversation, the resource has not been fully defined, right? Almost each drill hole makes it better. So again, we are a dramatically undervalued story. I'm super pumped to be an increasing larger shareholder. I did participate in that equity financing that you mentioned, Doc, a few months ago. Super pumped about the future of Emerita, IBW, and never mind, Asnukoyar, which is, I view it as a golden lottery ticket at some point in the future.
Yeah, good. Yeah. You guys still planning on the pre-fees or feasibility study on IBW in early 2024, correct? Because you've done the baseline studies, right? And you're moving towards from an exploration permit to an exploitation permit, which also brings tremendous value.
We've done the environmental baseline work. I think we've got somewhere around 15 or 16 months of data on that. So we're in good standing on that. I think the key variable or key information we need is just metallurgy, right? Yeah. The metallurgy work is ongoing, and we didn't really touch on it earlier in the conversation, but the metallurgy is being done to an incredibly high standard. This isn't a case of just grabbing a bunch of drill core, putting it in a bag and sending it to a lab. There's a lot of statistics that went into sample selection, creating the 3 samples that David mentioned that have been sent off to the lab. that process itself took 5 or 6 weeks just to get the samples selected. So the work is ongoing. We're going to get the answers. We're hoping for positive results, but the data we get will be done to a very high standard, and that should be able to feed a pre-feas or feasibility study at a later date. Personally, I'm hesitant to give you a firm date on a pre-feas, but that's sort of the direction we're moving towards, for sure.
Okay, great.
And then the conceptual mine plan that we are working on, of course, is essential for permitting, because to move the permitting further along, we need to start to site the infrastructure. So the conceptual mine plan basically gives us the ability to do the trade-off studies on where should we put the adit, where should we, put the infrastructure that will have the least impact environmentally is one of the key considerations, obviously, and of course you want it in a place where it's going to be efficient in terms of the operation. So that's the purpose of the ongoing engineering right now.
Great. I know you have another meeting to get to, Dave, so I'm gonna wrap it up here. I just the last question I have, I guess, is about how many meters do we have yet to report, and just that really, just to see what news flow is coming in the near term.
Boy, I'm not sure exactly. There's a couple or 3 holes, I think, that are in the lab, and some Alcura drilling as well. But as I mentioned, the drilling at this time of year is very slow, and the holes are deep.
Yeah.
So we're not getting the same rate of intercepts that you saw earlier in the year, obviously, until we get through this fire season.
Yeah. Well, I'm interested to see what.
We're doing some geophysical work, so there might be some information on the targeting, I think, particularly at Nuevo Tintillo, that'll come out. But those are the key things. There's even with these temperatures, it's just hard on equipment. We've had 2 drills that have had to replace motors because the oils run too thin. It's not the best situation. You think working in the winter is tough. Well, on machinery, they don't like 40 degrees either.
Good stuff. Well, so to summarize, you're cashed up for quite a while now, and 6 drills turning over the next year. We have Nuevo Tintillo being drilled, or in the next few months, you got Nuevo Tintillo, more drilling on Romanera and Alcura, metallurgy in the next month or 2 months, with an updated resource that includes the drilling since the resource came out. It sounds like good. Lots of catalysts as we move towards the court case in about a year and a half from now. It's great. The thing I love about this is that by the time the court case comes, you're going to have a project that is a feasibility study. Right now, before any of the upgrading or the new drilling, you're pushing 20 million tons. By then, who knows how big this thing is going to be. Being a dominant landholder and an employer in the region certainly sets you up well to swiftly take Asnacallia and move that towards a production decision as well, which is very exciting.
Yeah, I can't disagree with anything you just said there. Anyway, Doc, I appreciate you setting this up, and thank you kindly, and thank you kindly to everybody who tuned in and showed an interest.
Great. Thank you, David, and Ian. Thank you for joining the call.
Thanks, Doc.
Hey, you're welcome. And that concludes our talk with Emerita about the new discovered copper zone and where the company is heading and the catalysts that are coming down the pipe. Hope this was helpful to everyone, and thank you for your time. Take care.
Take care. Thank you.
This space was downloaded via spacesdown.com. Visit to download your spaces today.